All right. So welcome to Beidth al Tbeet, an evening of deconstructing colonial legacies. Annabel and Sam from Awafi Kitchen will be running the show tonight. Are captions showing up? Do people see them? I just want to make sure because I don't see them. Okay, yes, awesome. Thank you. So Annabel and Sam from Awafi Kitchen will be running the show tonight. So if you aren't cooking along tonight, this event will be recorded so you can in the future. So after the demonstration, we'll have a discussion and hopefully time for a Q&A. And thank you all for being here. My name is Summer. I'm joining you from Ohlone Land. I am part of the Radius of Arab American Writers, RAWI. We serve West Asian and North African artists and creatives through workshops and every other year festival and events like this. I'll paste some links in the chat so you can learn more about us. And if you're able, donations are great to sustain future programming like this. Zoom costs money, webinar feature costs money, et cetera, et cetera. And cool. So let me introduce our hosts. So Annabel Rabiyah is the head chef and co-founder of Awafi Kitchen. They're an urban farmer and educator and have worked and collaborated with restaurants across the Boston area. And Sam Rabiyah is a creative collaborator with Awafi Kitchen. Outside of Awafi, he also works with cartography, oral history, and digital storytelling to preserve and uplift narratives from the Swana region. And I will drop links in the chat to their social networks so you can learn more about them and the work they do. Cool. So live captions today are provided by Molly Block from Jewish Voice for Peace. So here's a little note from our co-sponsors, which I'll read from Melissa Nussbaum Freeman, who is joining us and initiated this sponsorship. Jewish Voice for Peace and the JVP Havurah Network are proud to co-sponsor Awafi and RAWI's first joint offering, Beidth al Tbeet, Deconstructing the Political History of an Iraqi Jewish Meal. They're excited to promote this event with our international membership as part of the Hanukkah Against Apartheid. We look forward to future collaborations that lift up the richness of Jewish anti-Zionist diaspora. And let me put their Instagrams in the chat. Cool, I'm so excited. This was supposed to be part of our RAWI Fest programming, but schedules didn't work out. So now we have full focus on the two of you. So Sam, Annabel, let's take it away.
Thank you so much for hosting us. We're so excited to be here. And it's good to see some familiar names in the participant list. Shout out to past collaborators and fellow members of the Seed Saving Collective who are here tonight. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot, so tonight's gonna be great. It is, yeah. I also am reflecting. I have some familiar faces also in the audience, but also a lot of new folks. So I appreciate everyone spending their Sunday night with us. We're gonna be doing, okay, Annabelle's checking out the camera. We have 2 cameras tonight. It's gonna be really legit. And we're gonna be walking through like a bunch of different stuff. So, you know, this is first and foremost like a cooking demonstration. So you should have received the ingredients list beforehand. Hopefully a bunch of y'all are following along. If not, this is gonna be a recipe made available to you through YouTube. So you will be able to follow along with us forever. Sounds very dramatic, but it's true. But I mean, this isn't just a cooking demo, right? I think we're gonna talk a little bit about our own personal history with the dish today, Beidth al Tbeet, as well as kind of how that's inextricable from the political history of the dish and how that connects to things like Zionism and how, you know, different cultural identities, cultural symbols kind of can have become misconstrued through different political landscapes. So we're going to get into that a little bit more later and hopefully have ample time for discussion. So yeah, Annabelle, are you ready to start cooking?
Yeah, I'm realizing, I hope that this matches the list that I sent out. For some reason, I'm just saying I am missing the links that were sent in the chat. If possible, if those links could be resent, that would be awesome. I'm going to go through some of the ingredients all of the ingredients that we're going to use tonight. And, you're welcome to join us in cooking or do it later or just enjoy the show. So I have a couple of things and it's pretty flexible, and feel free if you want to add in the chat, like some questions, we can, talk about potential modifications for the dish. So eggplant, you can use any kind. I'm using like the sort of classic Italian eggplant. We were growing some Iraqi eggplant. I know some people on this call are also growing this Iraqi eggplant or familiar with the variety. Unfortunately, this is not Iraqi eggplant, just from the grocery store. Parsley, and great, yeah, that's awesome. Parsley and onion. Mine doesn't have the peel on it, but if you ideally have the peel on your onion. Eggs, which I will show you in a minute, and black pepper, salt, and some kind of bread. So ideally some kind of flat bread. This is a samoon, which is a like Iraqi style, almost like a pita pocket. If you have some kind of like non-style flatbread or other type of flatbread, pita is always good too. That wraps everything together. And amba is our, here, let me, so that's maybe a little harder to find, but it's a pickled mango sort of chutney. You could get other types at South Asian markets, or you can get this or variants of this brand in most Arab markets, halal markets. It's actually quite hard to find. This is the OG brand the company was founded in 1883. So this one is the best objectively. And there are some other variants of it, and there's like a lot of more modern ones. I think even Trader Joe's, we can get into that later, but I think even Trader Joe's tried to offer some amba, and I tried it and it was absolutely horrendous and an insult to what amba should be. So, but there's a gradient. There's plenty of other good amba as well. So if you want something that's not the actual amba, you can definitely get other kinds of pickled mango at Indian or other South Asian grocery stores. And, if you have other kinds of pickles, like pickled turnips, I'm not going to make those tonight, but that's a good addition. If I have time, I might end up making a tomato cucumber salad. I'm not sure if I don't think I put that in the list of ingredients, but those are all things that can go. So this is a brunch style. I mean, you can make it for dinner. Breakfast for dinner is always great. Brunch style meal that's like very like make your own sandwich type of idea. And so it's pretty flexible about what exact ingredients, and there's not like a hard and fast rule about what goes in the dish. So what I did do, which is like kind of the Martha Stewart cheating style, is I pre-made the eggs. So I'll just say this and we'll probably talk about it more, but this is a traditional Shabbat meal. So that means that there's no labor on Shabbat on Saturday. And so the night before, there's a lot of, traditionally, and I mean, I think some people carry on this tradition, our family does not, but there is a practice of like preparing a lot of dishes ahead of time, so none of the cooking labor happens on the Sabbath. And so these eggs are traditionally cooked overnight. So Tbeet means overnight in this Iraqi Jewish dialect, or not sure if any Iraqis in the room can confirm if that's a word beyond our family's dialect. I'm curious if Tbeet sounds familiar. The eggs are usually cooked over chicken, but we have now this diaspora like rapid, not even rapid, but it's like a shorter hack if you don't want to make the chicken as well. And so I'm just going to start with that. So if you want to make this tonight, you can do like a quick version. I wanted to show you like the long new age version of these. And so basically what you should do is you should hard boil however many eggs you want. I did about 8 minutes in boiling water, just hard enough so the outside is like set. And then you put it in a pot with, oh, I love that. We used to beat in Maslawi dialect. So actually, okay, already on a tangent, but just that Maslawi dialect and Iraqi Jewish dialect are almost identical, which is a cool thing that we realized just by being in community with diasporic Maslawis. So our family was always like, oh, it's this obscure dialect, no one except Jews will understand you, and that actually there's this really intense like shared dialect, you know, lots of overlap. So Tbeet. So I didn't do this overnight. I started it at about 11 a.m. So it's been, you know, 8 hours. So it's kind of an amount of time to do overnight. I use the onion peel. So that's why I'm saying with your onion, save the peel. And you put it in this, in a pot with, I put 2 black tea bags in here. And so it's essentially an Iraqi tea egg. And that's just to get that smoky flavor. We wouldn't have used tea more, you know, in more, you know, like 3 generations ago, or even 2 generations ago, probably. One thing I do is I crack the eggs right after I hard boil them, and before I put them in the pot, because as you'll see, I'm going to do it at the end because it's still very hot. But as you'll see, it creates a really nice pattern. It lets more of the flavor of the onion and the tea get into the egg. You could poke a little hole. I find the cracking works really well. And it looks really cool too. So that I did for 8 hours in the oven at the lowest, at a very low temperature, 200, 250 is fine. You can do this right now if you want, and just do it for the duration of the class, or you can do it for longer if you want to eat a little later, or especially for the people who are starting this at 4. So the longer the better. I mean, I guess like I've never tried more than 12 hours. I don't know beyond that, but that's the eggs. So just to review, I'm not going to do it because I already did it, but you hard boil however many eggs you want, 8 minutes in boiling water. A little longer is fine too, because they're obviously going to cook forever. You crack them and then you put them in an oven, you know, oven safe pot with tea and onion peels, and you crack them before you put them in, and then you leave it covered or, you know, in your oven at 250 for however long. So that's our eggs, and that's sort of the feature ingredient, because the name of the dish is Beidth al Tbeet, which is just eggs overnight in Maslawi and Iraqi Jewish. So if anyone has any questions, and then maybe I'll start doing some stuff, and Sam, if you have any things that you want to add to what I said.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Yeah, Laura, I appreciate you bringing that comment up about the Maslawi dialect, because I think, I mean, I think that's a really common thing, especially for like Arab diasporic families coming from like a minority in the Arab world, to think that like their dialect or their customs or traditions are like completely isolated and unique. And that is obviously not the case in many instances. And so I think that's what's been really special about what Awafi Kitchen has done, is it showed that like, in a larger sense, like, you know, not only like the Iraqi Jewish dialect, but Iraqi Jewish food is very much like just Iraqi food, right? It's just like a special kind of Iraqi food. And I think what's been really awesome about this work is seeing how a lot of our traditions are like really connected to larger Iraqi traditions, right, Annabelle? So like, that's been definitely a special thing. But I think, again, like what makes Beidth al Tbeet like specifically Jewish is this thing that has to do with Shabbat, and the fact that like there is an element of it that requires like preparation on like a Friday evening, and then sort of leaving something to sit on Saturday, which is, I think, like a common thing that is like very special about a lot of like the Iraqi Jewish dishes that Awafi Kitchen makes. Yeah.
This is so fun. Just for full transparency, I think this is the first cooking demo Zoom event that my brother and I are doing together. Yeah, so I'm just like feeling a little like, I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm like, oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, and it's fun because this is also the first time you know, like I feel like there have been so many times in our life where we've eaten this dish, and it's been very different kinds of moments in time. So like, you know, like I remember being a little kid, and we used to go to this like Iraqi temple out in Queens, New York. And they would have like a giant pile of these tea-soaked eggs like sitting in a tower. And it took me so long to actually realize that what made them brown and have this like weird sort of webbed crack pattern on the inside. I thought that they were just like a special kind of egg, but they actually are, you know, exactly what Annabelle is making tonight, which is, you know, overnight tea-soaked eggs. And I will just interject and say that like I know Annabelle said there's many different ways that you can sort of crack the egg to get it in. You could poke a hole. I think that the crack pattern is like such a fundamental part of like how the egg should look. I feel like it wouldn't be Beidth al Tbeet for me without kind of like the dark crack pattern on it. So I do recommend cracking the egg and letting there actually be those like thick cracks in there so you get a really cool look afterwards.
Great. So I just want to jump in and start cooking, and then we'll be talking as we're going. So right now I'm cutting the eggplant. And I think it might be time if you want to do it now, or you can do it later. We're going to roast the eggplant at 400. So if you want to start preheating your oven, but we are going to salt the eggplant to sweat it. We're going to sweat a bunch of things actually. So sweating it is just putting salt on both sides, and then that makes water come out of the, you know, osmosis. But we'll let that sit for a while. So this is a nice shape for the eggplant. So we're thinking the eggplant is sort of well, I guess aside from the egg, is sort of the meat of the dish. And I'll say, well, Beidth al Tbeet is a very like Jewish Shabbat meal. An eggplant sandwich is a very quintessential Iraqi like sandwich. And so, you know, eggplant is a very important ingredient in that region and very beloved. And the way to make a good Iraqi eggplant is to smother it in oil and cook it at high heat. And so I always I think a lot of people in the US don't like eggplant if they weren't exposed to it in that way. But often, I think I've converted a number of people to like eggplant by cooking it like this. And I'm sure I didn't like eggplant as a kid too, until our dad was like, you can't be Iraqi and not like eggplant. But yeah, so I'm just cutting it maybe like, I don't know, half an inch thick.
Half an inch, yeah.
You know, these are big eggplant. I do think like if you are picking them at the grocery store or the farmer's market, or if you're growing your own eggplant, actually you want the smaller eggplant are the best. I think we're very trained to be like, bigger is better, and you always get like the biggest vegetable. But smaller is good. Because as it gets bigger, it develops more of the seeds, which is different. So we were saving seeds from these Iraqi eggplant, and that you actually want to get as big as possible. So that the seeds are as big as possible, but not exactly the most palatable time for the eggplant. So I'm just laying it out actually on this thing, so there's more space.
And Annabelle, how long do you usually let the eggplant soak for in the salt?
I mean, I think like 20 to 30 minutes.
Cool.
Realizing that I only have coarse salt. I might actually have to grind some up. I have like only very coarse salt.
Yeah, so this is a technique. Apparently, one of our aunties always told me about this as well. Like if you have eggplant that's out of season, salting it is actually a way to make it taste like fresher, or like it get sort of a weird bitter aftertaste that sometimes can come with eggplant when you're buying it like in the dead of winter or something, or like when it's not in season. And so I also, you know, growing up under the same roof as Annabelle, was subject to having to learn to like eggplant if I was to kind of belong in the family. And so and that's something that if you're ever cooking eggplant, even not in this dish, but otherwise, like, you know, salting it and using a ton of oil always makes it really delicious.
And so I'm going to roast it at 400, but you could also fry it on the pan.
And Annabelle, another question that I actually have How much oil? So how much oil is too much oil when it comes to frying eggplant?
I don't think there is a limit.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never reached it.
Okay.
I think, like, you know, you shouldn't have to use a whole bottle, but a lot.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it does feel like it can take a whole bottle though, right? Like they just
Right.
absorb
Yeah. Because
so much
keep
oil.
adding more, they're just sponges.
Yeah.
And they're really sweet. I think that's the thing that people don't realize about eggplant, and is what gets a lot of excitement for it once like someone realizes how good it is. So I'm pretty generous with the salt. I'm using like like a significant pinch, and then I'm just sprinkling on a pretty solid layer. I can't give like an exact amount. This is not the cooking class for that kind of thing. So the other thing we're gonna sweat is onions. So we're gonna make this sort of onion parsley relish that is a common addition to any kind of sandwich. I feel like sandwich doesn't necessarily feel like the right word, but like assembly with bread. Because I think like we think of it, we like fold it over and we eat it like a sandwich, but I think just like traditional way of eating in Southwest Asia is to like have a big piece of bread and like tear off pieces and like scoop up different things with the bread. So with kebab, for instance, which is like another classic Iraqi dish, potentially originated in Mesopotamia, I've heard, is you could have it as a sandwich, but I think more, like you're using the bread to add different, in Iraq, some people called eggplant as frying pan monster. Yarob has a lot of great quips about food history in Iraq. We recently worked on a cooking class in a traditional reed house called a modif in Philly. And Yarob is like a very skilled artist and has done a lot of work around communications and Iraqi culture. And he helped build this reed house, which has been, he was saying like, oh, so much community has been built here. And like my limited experience of that one time is like people cried, people like told their life story. It was like such a special event, and something about being in that space like really inspired people, especially people with Iraqi heritage. So grateful for the work that he's doing and all of his interesting little tidbits about, and then also I've heard from Yarob is that aswad is just a word that they use, like if you're going to the market to get eggplant, just means black, is like just synonymous with eggplant. And it's funny because the Iraqi eggplant that we're growing, saving the seeds from, is the variety is just called aswad. So if you can tell, I'm cutting the onions like really small because we're thinking it's a relish. It doesn't have to be like perfect, it's what you want it to be. And we're gonna salt them so they will also lose some of their water. And part of that with the onion is also, once it loses its water, it's gonna break down some of the cell walls and then it'll be less spicy. Like it'll start to, like you can cook with heat and you can also kind of cook with salt or with vinegar, if you're defining cooking as breaking something down to make it more palatable. So in this sense, this situation, we're breaking it down with salt. So yeah,
another...
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I just wanted to lift up another little tidbit of Iraqi dialect. Jeffrey just posted in the chat that the Iraqi family refers to sandwiches as sapoya. I'm not sure if the word is Arabic or Chaldean. I don't know if you ever heard of that, or if any other Iraqis in the chat have heard of that.
What's the word? Woo.
Looks like sapoya. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Definitely doesn't sound Arabic. I would say like Persian or Chaldean, or that's cool. I've never heard that. I'm crying right now. Just need a minute. Woo, okay. All right, more salt. Thank you, Jeffrey. Ooh, okay, so salt, I'm going pretty generous on the salt. Right now I'm just gonna mix it up, and we'll come back to this later. Okay. We have a little leftover parsley. Actually, it's not good.
Almost serve rotten parsley on the live stream. Damn.
Yeah, so Sam, you talked about like that memory of the eggs at the Iraqi shoal. And I also, I think that I really remember this would just be a meal that our father made, often on a Sunday, which is like the Americanized Sabbath of sorts, like the day where often like no one is working or you have people over for brunch. Could be a Saturday too, but basically anytime we had like leisure time and like friends or family was coming over and he wanted to like do something special, and it did feel really special, a little slower, a little more intentional, and yeah, I think it's special that he learned to cook. I think that I've told people that as our grandmother was dying, I think she was somewhat resistant to teaching him and our uncle to learn some of these recipes, but realized it was all hands on deck in terms of preserving this culture and these recipes. And so eventually relinquished and, let them learn. And, and it is special that like we had a paternal figure who was really like the cook of the household and really focused on sharing this, passing down this culture, and here we are. So yeah. So I'm picking parsley. I'm just picking off the like thicker stems because they are a little tough. You can chop those fine. You can put them in a salad if you chop them fine, or whenever you're cooking something with parsley, or if you have like broth vegetable bag, you can put them in there. I try not to get rid of they're really tasty.
Yeah, so I guess Annabelle, what was like your earliest memories of like having this dish, which was probably at grandma's house or?
Yeah, maybe. Honestly, like I really think your memory's better than mine, but I really think I really think like I'm mostly associated with like eating it at our house with our father. I more associate like at grandma's house, like having a big dinner. I'm sure we did, like I have some maybe distant memories of that. Do you remember eating it at Rachel's?
I honestly, I don't. I feel very similar to you, where I feel like when grandma's like she would make like a feast that covers the table, and this was more of something that was for like a casual late morning meal. And in that sense, like that makes me think more of like Sunday mornings just at home with dad. I think also too, I mean, another really ubiquitous Iraqi Jewish like breakfast item that I have very early memories of is something called Beidth al Tbeet, which you'll realize a lot of our dishes have, for the Arabic speakers in the room, like have really simplistic names. So Beidth al Tbeet means eggs overnight. Beidth al Tbeet means eggs with meat, which essentially are like little fritters. They're almost like little like pancakes of scallions, eggs, spices, and some kind of meat. So our dad would usually make it with like ground chicken, but you could make it with fish sometimes. I think sometimes you could even make it with turkey or some kind of white meat. And so I think that would always pair. I always remember whenever we'd have Beidth al Tbeet, there would always be Beidth al Tbeet there as well. And so it's just great. It was like just a breakfast doused in olive oil, and of course, like you would put amba on everything. And it was just, and it was a lot of things that you would make in advance. So like, Saturday morning, the house would just fill with smoke because our dad would be making like hundreds of little Beidth al Tbeet. And then, that would just kind of be something we take out of the fridge every once in a while. So it was, again, something that you could make in advance and would store really well. And so, yeah, I associate more just kind of with like an easy late morning meal kind of thing.
A few things. It's just like, wish you could be here, but just like hearing you talk about Beidth al and I'm like chopping parsley and just like smelling parsley, and it makes me think of just like that smell is such a nostalgic smell for all these dishes. Parsley is such an essential ingredient, and thinking about just like how labor intensive, I'm sure any Iraqi would agree with you, like how labor intensive all the food is, and like, yeah, and chopping all this parsley by hand. And I think that is something like about modern versions of it. I think the Cuisinart really stepped in, like maybe the precision about some of the recipes was lost in favor of like being a little bit more efficient, and like thinking about that, how to like create space to continue to make these recipes when there isn't like a full-time stay-at-home, like matron or whatever the right word is, like, just like, I think that is a struggle of like our generation or like the past couple of generations. Oh, I guess I added this, which I didn't necessarily mean to do. Don't add the parsley necessarily. I would set it aside because we're gonna squeeze out the onions. It's like fine that there's some in here, but yeah, what else was gonna say about that? I don't remember.
I know we haven't totally gotten there yet, but could you talk a little bit more about the bread that we're using today?
Oh yeah, sure.
So I think before we even started talking, someone dropped in the chat, they recognized it as samoon bread. So I think we have some folks that are already familiar with it.
Where did I even get this? Did you get this?
No, I know I did. I got you.
It was in my freezer.
They're probably from the Portland bakery. What other place would it be from?
A bakery closed, I think.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I was like,
there used to be, just for context, people are probably like, what are they talking about? There used to be like a traditional Iraqi bakery in Portland, Maine, which is about 2 hours away from where Annabelle and our parents live currently. And then this is where you could get this traditional Iraqi flatbread called samoon. It sounds like maybe they closed down, which is really sad, but
there's another one in Worcester. Okay. You know what? They were selling this in a local, so like there's a local halal market down the street from my house. It's like fine. But it's really nice to have it, to get some of these ingredients. And there's a bakery in Worcester, which is like 45-hour from my house. And so sometimes there's like fresh bread from Worcester, and they have the Ala Adin bakery. They have the samoon, and they have the khubz tanur, also heard is called lafa, or I guess lafa is any bread that you like wrap stuff, so that would be perfect for this dish, or kebab or anything like that. But basically khubz tanur is like, if you are not familiar, is like most similar to naan bread, probably the precursor to naan bread, or how can you really claim who started what when it's like flatbread that someone probably just figured out how to make on a fire. But yeah, it is traditionally made in a clay fire oven, and is like huge and kind of charred, and is a big flat circle. And so we didn't really grow up with anyone making that in our household or in our family, but I think there was a lot of like nostalgia about this bread, which is like so essential to food in Iraq. Like, I was saying, like is actually like a utensil beyond just like a major food source. And you think about like, this is the region where grain was cultivated for the first time. So I got really excited about okay, I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna read Yadav's tidbits later. I'm excited to search through the chat and read it, but I hope you guys enjoy that. yeah, I got really obsessed with making a variety of it at home because there's a lot of stories of like when people immigrated to the US, like this is before our family came mostly in like the 60s. This is before Indian restaurants were really widely. Now, like I think going back to Trader Joe's, I think like our dad just gets like those little naan breads from Trader Joe's, and that's like his, like he's like, all right, great, this is good enough. Because there isn't really Iraqi bakeries around, like unless you go to Worcester. And so like I heard a story that a cousin went to a pizza place and asked for just pizza with no toppings, no sauce, no anything on it, because he just wanted like the wood-fired cooked bread, and they were like, okay. And so just like that idea of like trying to recreate something, like no one really made it at home. It was the kind of thing you would get from your local makhbaz, and or like on your, you know, I think, you know, my dad remembers like leaving school and the bread stall being like across the street, and you'd have khubz wa amba, and like that was your midday snack. So yeah, so we're not going to do the flatbread today, but you know, I just thought it was nice. I had this samoon, and so that works super well for the sandwich. So I think preheat the oven to 400 if you are like actually doing this. I might even do 425 just to like expedite things. Okay, so we have a lot of things prepped that are like sweating or sitting. I might chop some tomatoes. If anyone has any questions. Yeah, pizza. Yeah, pizza, man. It's just so yeah, I'm gonna cut some tomatoes. Maybe we can like talk a little bit more. I know that we also want to talk about sort of like the political context of this dish. Oh, I do have the Iraqi, some really old, well, not really old, but you know, it's the end of the season in Boston. I know you like West Coasters can't even believe that. But we had our first frost early or mid-November, which is actually late by Boston standards. So I harvested all these tomatoes. This is the Iraqi version. They're like small ones. It's like the end of the season, but they actually go pretty small. I actually think the average size is about this size. And these were all like green when I harvested them about a month ago at this point. And now they're red and they've been sitting. So it's the last of the harvest. Sort of fun to include these. So I might not actually make the full salad. I think that just having slices is nice too. What were you saying, Sam? We were like in a different conversation. You were just talking about the idea of having like fresh sliced, you know, tomatoes and cucumber. Definitely, like whenever you go to someone's house, it's just such an essential like little note. Right. I always, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because we were just talking about, you know, like what is like Iraqi food, Iraqi cuisine, what is like the most typical thing. And almost for me, it's like not even about these more complex dishes, but just kind of these like different sort of eating practices that I always remember like our family partaking in, of like, you know, we'll be at like some roadside diner and auntie will ask for like a plate of just sliced tomatoes with salt. And like the, you know, the waiter will look at her like, what are you talking about? But that, you know, that things like that. So like sliced cucumbers and salt, obviously like having like lebne there was always something that was on the table. Like just these little staples are really what kind of, I felt like were so emblematic of like what it was like to eat Iraqi food. And so, I mean, yeah, I think that that's like something that also feels like very connected to this, are these kind of like small like garnishes and things like that. Yeah, I also did want to say too, where like, just to underscore how unbelievably special the samoon bread is. You know, Annabelle mentioned this, where like a common street snack in Baghdad was like a samoon bread with amba in it, which I feel like the analogy for me thinking about like sort of like Western American food, where like if samoon is just like bread and amba is like the Iraqi ketchup, it would be like having a sandwich of just ketchup. which I mean, I think it just underscores just how unbelievably valued these ingredients are, that they can just like stand on their own and be like a whole meal in themselves. Of course, yeah, Beidth al Tbeet is a little bit more, has a little bit more in it than just like a condiment. But yeah, just underscoring kind of
more, really. It's not much more, you know, it's like,
yeah, it's still pretty simple, right?
Yeah, which is so nice.
Yeah. And so
yeah, especially if you like fresh ingredients and like how they can stand on their own. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. I wonder if this is a good moment. I know, so like, obviously we've been building up this dish so much. A lot of you are going to get to try it in your homes. Hopefully you're following along making it right now. I guess, I mean, part of the sort of other part of like this demonstration day is also kind of talking about some of the other ways that I think the Western world has seen this dish in particular. So I don't know, Annabelle, if you want to necessarily talk about kind of the ways that we've actually started to see this dish show up in different contexts in the US, and sort of what that felt like.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, I think like there's a history of, you know, I think just the reality is that our family stayed a little later, but like in the 50s, there was a mass exodus of Iraqi Jews from Iraq who lived there for like thousands of years, and, you know, are ostensibly like indigenous to that region. And then within, you know, a 20-year period are all not there anymore. I think there are like trace populations, but it's really not, you know, and they were like 30 or 40% of Baghdad was Jewish in the 30s. So, you know, the streets shut down for Shabbat. So you think about like how it really was like a, you know, a foundational place for Jewish community. And so, you know, one reality, you know, we don't have as much like our immediate family doesn't have as much of the migration pattern of being in Israel 48, like before. We were like lucky in a way, like privileged in a way to, you know, be able to go to the US, which, you know, for whatever that is, now we live here. But, you know, I think 90%, if not more, of the Iraqi Jewish population lives in Israel 48 right now. And that is like where a lot of the food culture exists and continues to exist. And one notable, you know, I think there's like food that has become very famous there. One notable history is this dish and what it is now, what is evolved to, which is called sabich, which the story is that this guy, this Iraqi guy was selling newspapers on the street and like had a Beidth al Tbeet sandwich from his wife. And someone was like, hey, are you selling food? And he just sold them that sandwich, and then they were obsessed with it. They brought their friends and it became very famous. And it's called sabich because the guy's name was Sabih. So, and the like sort of like modern Hebrew sort of doesn't have that sound, even though like ancient Hebrew did. So that is now like a very popular, the irony is this is like a Shabbat meal, and the funny thing is now it's like a fast food sandwich. Which like, you know, is different. I think there's like other things in it. I don't actually know that much, but I, you know, and Sam was saying like, how do we see it now? Like my perspective is just as an American, Iraqi diasporic Jewish person, and like some of these restaurants in Boston who are like Israeli restaurants, like suddenly it's like sabich, the national dish of Israel. Like, and I'm just like, wow, that really sounds like Beidth al Tbeet. Like, that's so weird. You know, and then some people will talk about the history of it having Iraqi roots. But I think that it's like, it's interesting. It's like, it's, you know, I think it's challenging to like figure out, you know, you don't see, part of why Awafi started is you don't see like Iraqi food or Iraqi culture like very much represented in the US or in the West, other than being like this war-torn country and terrorists and Saddam Hussein, you know, and then when like the one time some dish from Iraq is represented as Israeli food, I think that can feel, you know, like painful in a way, and also like it is a reality of migration, and you know, but I think we can talk more about it, but just, I think the way that food has been branded from this country that like started very recently and, was like, great, let's like piece together all of these dishes from all over the world and call it Israeli food, when like really, I guess in a sense it is like, and Sabia is one of those, like, I think if you compare it to like, what's that called? Shakshuka, which really like is not even, it's just like, that's like it is like has Jewish roots in Tunisian juice, but it's also just like a very quintessential Tunisian dish or North African dish. And now is pretty much known globally because of like branding as an Israeli national dish. Like, you go to a Israeli falafel and shakshuka place and you're like, that's just so weird to me because North Africa and like the Levant, where these two dishes are from, are like really far apart from each other, like, and culturally dissonant, and to like just be like, oh yeah, it's like one cuisine. It just, it erases a lot. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is. It's just, I think Sam and I have like been processing this and wanted to like talk about that. And I'll throw it over, like, I'm sure you have things to add as well. Yeah.
No, and I mean, there's so much of what you brought up, Annabelle, that I feel like deserves more attention and deserves more discussion. I also want to make sure that we're able to actually get to the end of the dish too, so that people know how to make it. But I mean, I just think, so much of what you said. So like, I mean, first off, like talking about our own families, like
30, right?
migration history.
Sorry, we have till 8:30, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Big yes
sorry.
from someone.
Okay, sorry. That's it. Go ahead.
So I mean, I think like, so as I said, that not only our immediate family, but the vast majority of our family would migrated directly from Baghdad, from Iraq, to the US or Canada in the sort of like the late 50s to the late 60s. And that was, in a lot of ways, that was a really privileged position. I think, it's privileging in that, it allowed, so Annabelle and I have like a pretty uncomplicated, I've heard you describe it this way, Annabelle, where like, we have a very uncomplicated perception and relationship with Israel as members of a family that never really had any connection there, and actually saw it as kind of this like weaponizing political force within their communities in Baghdad. And I think that's what's really hard about thinking and talking about like Arab Jewish history, is that it's like always just completely inextricable from politics, right? And that the vast majority of Iraqi Jews migrated to Israel because a lot of reasons, because they didn't have the means to go anywhere else, right? And Israel had a whole campaign to recruit Jews from that region in order to kind of build up the occupation, right? And that, so like, when we think about food, food is food, but also like it is kind of inextricable from the political history. And, I think this is probably out of scope for, a discussion like this, but I think it's also important to note how there is like a long history of like anti-Zionism within the Jewish community in Baghdad, right? Predating 48, and how a lot of that kind of was dismantled by pressures from Israel and the Iraqi government, right? So, I mean, that's something that I encourage y'all to look into on your own time. But coming back to this dish, I think, I think like, yes, there is a reality of Iraqis migrating to Israel. And I think what starts to feel, from our perspective as Americans, very uncomfortable is when the first times that we're seeing our food, that we're seeing Iraqi food in the grocery stores and restaurants and, in the Northeast, like, it's branded as Israeli food, right? And not only that, but it's described to be like originated in Israel, which is kind of erasing the whole history of the dish, right? Like, I think like something we talk about is like, what is it? How is it really, how can you take a dish like Sabih that is such a clear like remake of something that Beidth al Tbeet and say it that it's something that's originated in Israel, right? Like, it sort of implies that there didn't exist a history and a community and a cultural practice around the dish before the creation of the state of Israel, which, you know, our family is living proof of that existing. And so that's, I think, just how I viewed that kind of discomfort. And I think it extends, you know, like a lot of the things we've talked about, so like amba, the pickled mango, that's starting to like kind of make the rounds in somewhat like mainstream grocery, you know, it's like in Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's will reference it as like an Israeli condiment, right? Maybe it's a condiment that's used in Israel, but it's also like kind of like the central condiment of Iraq and has a history that extends that like so long beyond that, right? And so that's why, you know, like this food like never is, you can't like ever pull it away from like the politics behind, you know, Arab Jews and the migration of Arab Jews, and that's always kind of like a present thing whenever we're making this food.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, that was really well put. And yeah, I feel like you really like, yeah, and you know, I think so much, it's like the same way that we talk about, you know, and I think we, so, you know, like we get pushback framing it that way. And I think so much of it is like, yeah, like food migrates, like also amba is an Indian condiment, like it's not Iraqi. And like through the spice trade and the, you know, and like, you know, merchants coming and going, like it became famous in Iraq. I think the difference there, it's always about power. Like the way we talk about racism is like, oh, well, people are racist against white people. It's like, well, white people have a lot more power and a lot more like visibility. And so if someone's saying something negative about, you know, some European heritage person, they get lots more narratives to like drown that out, you know, and you know, so a condiment going from like two countries in the global south, like where like representation is pretty equally, you know, versus like the power that the Israeli government and its food branding has globally versus like the lack of power that a place like Iraq does in terms of its representation globally. I think there's a level of responsibility. And, you know, I think another example other than shakshuka is hug, which is another like famous Israeli condiment that people I think know has Yemenite heritage, but I only recently realized the hawik, and you also, Sam, like mentioned this, like similarly, like we don't even know the like Yemeni word for it. It's just become so popularized as this Yemenite dish because that's the only people who have the resource right now to share it, you know, and I, you know, and that's like, it's a shame, you know, like you think about like the deeper history versus like, oh, it's like, you know, so trendy and then like, you know, it's only known in the context of this fusion of very varying cultures. Like you have your latkes with skug. I think that's like something that is very heartbreaking, watching Jewish food, which I think historically people criticize for being too Ashkenazi centric. Like, oh, Jewish food is just latkes and it's just, you know, matzo ball soup and it's just, you know, this and that. But now there's this weird, you know, I think largely influenced by the like Israeli food branding. Like if you're Jewish, you get to claim North African food, you get to claim Russian food, you get to like you can claim all these things just because there happen to be Jews living there, which like doesn't really, like Christians don't do that, you know, and you know, like Muslims, I think it is different when you're like a, you know, not a dominant like in power religion or whatever, but I I think that it is like a little strange to like equate these, and then it makes the food. I remember like talking to a chef about food appropriation. It's like, and I don't always agree with this. I think there's more historical like responsibility, but she was like, all I care about is that it tastes good. And at some point, like when you're doing this weird fusion where there's like skug, but it's like brisket, and it's like, you know, so you're like, what? Like these like ingredients weren't really meant to like be together.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and like I think also just a quick comment from Dina about, should we pop the eggplant in the oven?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that it was like clear when Sam was talking what I'm doing, but yeah, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
So
we'll bring it back just for a second. I want to come back to this discussion, of course. But
yeah. I threw the eggplant in the oven.
Okay, let's see.
You can put it on 425 and let it take longer. If you want to speed it up, you can put it on broil. And we're gonna broil and we're gonna flip it in about 10 minutes, you know, and I'm gonna, can someone be on reminding me? No, I'll send it.
I got it. You want a 10-minute timer?
Oh, I got it. I can do the oven. I was like, oh, my phone's in use, but and okay, as we were talking, I've squeezed, and that's another thing. I don't know if like other people relate to this, but like using your hands when cooking, I feel like I really associate that with our family, to the point that I think like the like Western people in our family get very like overwhelmed how much like my dad uses his hands, or like other members of the family are just like getting their hands in everything, and like, you know, wash your hands. But like, yeah, it does seem like hands, I don't know, are just such an important tool in the kitchen. And so I squeezed the onions for a while, and there's like some liquid at the bottom. And that's also just like breaking the onions down. And you can go as far as you want in terms of like how soft you want the onion to be, and how, yeah. I'm gonna add a ton of pepper. Pepper is a, think of it less as like a end of the meal seasoning and more like an actual spice that you're putting in for a significant amount of flavor. Pepper is like a really important ingredient in like soups and meat, and this relish is like lots of pepper, like tablespoon of pepper, maybe not for this little an amount, but
this is gonna get really sore.
Right, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna squeeze this maybe a little more. Like, and the longer you let it sit, but it's up to you, and like at the end of the day, you're only eating a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, eggplant is in either broil or high temp for the oven. And this is being squeezed out.
Cool.
All right, thanks for following up on that.
Yeah, no, it's good. I had a feeling this is going to happen where we forget about the food after starting to talk about other things.
Get into politics and you're just like,
yes. Yeah, so I mean, I guess going back to our conversation, yeah, I mean, and I think I agree, like I think there is like a level of sadness and like anger when, you know, we start to see, you know, Jewish food, which is such an unbelievably diverse and rich culinary history from around the world, like just kind of like flattened in this way. I think that's what's like really amazing about like diasporic Jewish communities, that they're all really good cooks, right? Like there's like such a strong tradition of Jewish food all around the world, even if it looks so different from each other. And that it always reflects the culture that like Jewish communities are indigenous to, right? So like Iraqi Jewish food is really like Iraqi food, right? Like a lot of Ashkenazi Jewish food is really just like Eastern European food, but like done in a very specific way. And like, I mean, also that a lot of that's really delicious, right?
Yeah,
like it's all really delicious. And I think just like going back to the example of Beidth al Tbeet is that, you know, this could be, you know, I think what's frustrating is like it loses its value as a culinary dish and becomes this like political tool, right? Like all of a sudden when it gets rebranded as Israeli food around the globe, it's now being used as a way to just like show that there wasn't a history before Israel, which is such a big part of how Israel continues to justify the occupation. And I just wanted to lift up, I saw a lot of great connections people were making in the chat where it's, you know, we're talking about like this Arab Jewish meal, but you can think about this in larger ways, how that also connects to the way that, you know, like a lot of the ways that Israel will say that for Arab Jews that there wasn't really a history or like a strong piece of societies in the Arab world that Jewish people held, right? And that was another way that justified kind of the migration of Jews to Israel. And then also just thinking about how Israel, a big part of kind of the political project of Israel is saying that there wasn't Palestine there before the creation of the state of Israel, right? And like how, you know, that's yet another way how it's this just justification of like this idea that there like wasn't a history before, right? When that history, at least for Jewish food, is such a huge part of Jewish history, right? So I think as Jews, that is really sad for us to see that whole history kind of dismantled in service of the occupation.
And it does a disservice to, and I've really emphasized this, I think like there's a big movement of like uplifting Mizrahi culture. Now, I mean, I know, and I think it's good, but there is like a level of tokenization of like, that these Ashkenazi institutions are like, oh, like teach us your prayers and your food, and then like I'll make it for Rosh Hashanah. You know, I'm like, no, that's not like I think that there's a real hurt of like, any exiled group, right? And I think many Iraqis have this experience who are not Jewish, but like Jews do typically share the experience of having been exiled. And, you know, there's this like severing of like being rooted in a place. And I think it's like work to do to like reclaim your roots in wherever you're from. Like, what did your grandma make? What did your great grandma make? Like, and like how rich that is that like your family has been like making those dishes for generations and like holding on to that. And I think in the excitement of like uplifting like non-European Jewish culture, like people are a little like self-hating about like, oh yeah, like kugel's so gross. Like actually like these recipes are super great. I think it's like we want to uplift all of them, but I think it's like so healthy. And you know, we have Ashkenazi heritage on our mother's side and she's Russian. And I think like being able to like, you know, it's a little bit more work because she's many generations American, but being able to like trace that back has been really meaningful work as well. And then like feeling like you can claim those roots, like feeling like just because like your family was Jewish, it doesn't mean that you're not from there and you didn't live there for 2,000 years, like is a long time. Yeah, and I will just say I added a lot of pepper. And
that's
the parsley,
you can you can't even see the relish under that
pepper. Yeah. And so that's the relish. Yeah, and you know, I think that is something that's actually a much deeper wound. We can speak about the wound of like sabich or whatever. But I mean, I think like all of this in the context of like the wound of like falafel or like hummus or like, you know, like kak or mosachen being called Israeli is just like so painful and is so, you know, it's like so violent in a way that like, yes, there's like literal violence happening. But like, you know, just to be told that something that, you know, your people have been rooted in a place and making for a while is now suddenly not yours, or, you know, is this, and I think just like everyone in the US, as we're like this food is now getting marketed to us, like being thoughtful consumers of like, what is this dish? Like, is this really Israeli food? Like what, you know, and like, I think not every Israeli, you know, I don't want to say like any Israeli institution that comes to the US is inherently bad. I really don't agree with that. I think like everyone deserves to like, you know, but I think as like in the same way that like as like, you know, as someone who's on indigenous land in the US, like I have an obligation and I'm like wrong until proven right. You know, like I'm like, I have to do so much work to really like for reparations or for, you know, for just like existing. And I think like, or there's just a responsibility of being white, of being like colonizers, of being, and I think the same is true of like, if you're serving Israeli food, like you better like really get the roots down, or, you know, think about where the resources are going, or whose story is being told. And there isn't a clear answer. I mean, we live in a globalized world and everyone's cooking everyone's food. It's not like, you know, you can really live in a vacuum like that. But I think just, you know, being thoughtful consumers, like being thoughtful as we learn these recipes, as we tell the stories of these recipes. And I think there is there is some level of a right way to do it. You know, giving people their land back is also great way to do it too. But like I'm on Massachusetts land, right? You know, so it's complicated, but yeah, that's my.
Just really quickly, I mean, I hate to interrupt you, Annabel, but bring us back to the food. Dina also is asking if we should brew the tea and let it cool before you put the cracked eggs in.
No, just just put the, you can use the boil, you can even use the water from the eggs. I think I added a little bit more because the pot is bigger, so it's not submerged. I think it lost a lot of liquid, but the eggs weren't fully submerged. Just pour the water in, and I had the tea bags in already, and I had the onion peels in already, and I just like hit the eggs on the counter before I put them in. And it might be nice, I don't know, like if you are making this dish, like if you do have time and space tomorrow for willing to wait. I mean, if you're really planning on this being dinner, then, you know, whatever, but like cook those eggs overnight and have it tomorrow. Okay, I'll show you this.
Someone said, Camille said, not related to the food, but I love Annabelle's hair.
Thank you.
Amazing. So how long have the eggplants been in the oven for?
I think 12 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know if they're quite done. No, they're ready to be flipped. I'm just showing you.
Ooh.
Mmm.
I can just imagine how that smells right now.
You know what? They're pretty much ready. I think, well, yeah, flipping them.
Yeah. I mean, I would
flip them and then just do like.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to save some time for Q&A. So
yeah, I think we're good. So, you know,
expedite.
I'm just gonna say, like, I'll do a little thing at the end, but like if you want to be like watching the video in the background as we're continuing to talk, and I'll just like start assembling once the eggplant is and I'll be like unpeeling the eggs and stuff. But yeah, let's, you know, right now this is gonna cool. I think it's actually ready. So I'm gonna turn the oven on.
Amazing. Okay, well, I mean, we have about 15 minutes left. Is it okay? I really want to hear, we're getting such great love in the chat. I do want to open it up to the rest of the group for questions. So Annabelle, would you be okay if we tried to do Q&A while you're finishing things up?
No, like I'm saying, like essentially done. So
okay,
let's
amazing.
do it. And then I might be doing some stuff in the background. So if you're like watching, cool. If you're trying to get the recipe, then just like keep your eyes on the screen.
I just had a quick question from Jeffrey about, so the eggplant was salted and sweated and then just cooked in the oven with olive oil at 425 degrees. Yeah, actually I broiled it. Okay. I did preheat the oven. Sometimes, like, I don't know if that actually helps or not. So you could do 425, 400 and just like cook it for longer. But broil is like a nice quick way to do it. So I broiled it for like 12 minutes and I didn't even flip it. It just was thin enough that it was good. You could flip it maybe like 7 minutes in if you wanted to, but it looks fine. So yeah. Parsley sounds also make a good snack. All right, well, yeah, thank you all so much for being here, for listening to us. I know we've talked through like a lot of different things, so I'm sure there's questions about the food, there's questions about the recipe, there's also questions or comments about the discussion. You all should be able to see a Q&A box. I can't actually see what you see right now, but you should have that. If you want to drop any question or comment that you have in the Q&A box, I can try and bring a few up on this call, and we can talk through it. Awesome. So I'll give like a minute or so for folks to
also like really want to look at the
any
chat.
Questions they have in there.
I'm just going to be reading the chat. I'm eating a cucumber.
Yeah.
DM us for the best hookup. I'm a hookup.
It's true. There's only, so for anyone who's in New York City, there's fewer and fewer places that carry the ship brand label of Amba. So there's one place on Atlantic Avenue on the like Cobble Hill, Brooklyn Heights border that does have the big bottle of ship brand Amba that we are using tonight. So if you want more details on that, definitely let us know. We can point you in the right direction. And we don't get like, it sounds like we're getting like some kind of commission or something. We absolutely do not. We're just trying to spread the love.
We should.
Yeah, we should, honestly.
I feel like if we increase the demand for it, like I think there's like a feeling, I think during the peak lockdown part of the pandemic, there was like a supply chain issue with the amba, and I like had a meltdown. And I was like telling everyone to watch out for it, and like the stores that offered it dwindled, and like it does last forever, but the ones that were available were just like really old. And I was worried like maybe the company is closing and like it's just outdated, and like now there's these new modern versions and that's just going to be all there is left. And then it came back, and I think Sam, you like called me. I was like in a meeting in midday at work, and you were like, "Amba's back!"
No, it was such a big deal.
And then like a lot of people had known that I was that. So like anyone who went to like any Arab market. So now we're like rolling in Amba, but you know, you never know.
Okay, we're getting a lot of really amazing. So we're getting a lot of really amazing Q&A questions here. I'm gonna bring a few of them forward. Jeffrey just asked if we've read the book by Naim Giladi called Ben Gurion Scandals. It's hugely detailed regarding Iraqi Jews and the creation of the State of Israel. I have not read that. I don't know, Annabelle, if you've read that.
Wait, say it again. Sorry, I'm like.
So it's called Ben Gurion Scandals by Naim Giladi. Yeah, I mean, there is another book called The Lure of Zion that I know a lot of, that like our dad always lends out to people and never gets the book back. I'm one of those people. I have his copy and I haven't given it back to him. But it's written by this Palestinian scholar, Abbas Shiblak, basically about like the history of Jews in Iraq and how it connects to like different campaigns of Zionism, which is really, really interesting. And I think speaks to a lot of the topics that we talked about today. But that's also a really great suggestion, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for bringing that forward. I'm getting a comment as well.
There's a couple others, like Ella Shohat is a very you know, like we love her for speaking our perspective, is like a professor at NYU and has written a bunch on the Arab Jew, and has a book and several like pretty useful articles. There's a new book called When We Were Arabs, which is written about the Iraqi Jewish perspective. And When the Beatles Took Over Baghdad is like a really beautiful sort of narrative, more fiction, I think, narrative of like girl growing up in the 60s and 70s in Baghdad as a Jew.
Yeah, I'm seeing also people are named, so Yarab dropped Michael Rakowitz, who's this Iraqi Jewish artist. Also Masoud Hayyoun, who is someone of like Arab Jewish descent who just wrote a book that came out last year called, I think, what was it, When We Were Arabs, I believe.
Yeah, that's the When We Were Arabs. I haven't read it yet, but I have it.
Yeah, it's like there's like a 30 book like backlog at the library for that book. Wow. And then just bringing us back to the Q&A, Laurel just mentioned also Iraqi Jewish, and one of my primary concerns was always how different our traditions felt from Ashkenazi Judaism, especially growing up in the South. What did you guys notice as big differences in shul, etc., between Iraqi Judaism and more American forms? Also, do you ever make your own amba, because it is hard to find good ones in Austin? Wow. Okay, well, we will send you some in the mail because that sounds rough. That's such a great question. Yeah, like I guess like cultural differences felt within like Ashkenazi Jewish spaces definitely is something that felt very, very present growing up. I mean, honestly, I think food was a huge major difference, right? In terms of like how we embodied our Judaism versus like how other peers like who we grew up with embodied their Judaism. I don't know, Annabelle, if you have anything that you want to add to that.
I think we were in Jordan, and there was like, we were in a cab, and someone was playing like the call to prayer. Oh no, it was just the Quran. They were playing it, and I was like, why is this Iraqi Jewish shul? And I think that's something that people really find hard to believe. Like the ritual, the like, I think it's I like piyutim, I think is a word, like the way that prayers are recited is, you know, it's if you think of just like you know, a religion that was like in an Islamic area, like a majority Islamic area, like it's going to be influenced by the way music and cult, and how like that's just like also just a deeper reflection of culture. So yeah, so prayers sound much more like Middle Eastern. I don't know what the right word, you know.
Totally. I mean, just like a very different kind of melody, right? Like I think that was something like we would go to like our Ashkenazi Jewish friend's house and we would never really know like the kind of sing-songy melodies that people would sing prayers for, because that was very much connected. Oh, wow. Okay. Look at those eggs, everybody. That is so perfect.
Art.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, yeah, pardon the interruption, but yeah, that's what I was saying about the cracks. That's like such a specific thing about how the Beidth al Tbeet are supposed to look. I'm glad that you guys get to see that now too. So yeah, I guess going back to your question, Laura, your comment, Laura, like, yeah, I think like the ways that prayer sung is like a huge thing. And I think that, yeah, Annabelle, what you said really is such a like insightful analysis of why that felt different. Oh, Dina's asking, can y'all put it on gallery view so we can see? Are we allowed to?
Like
See, gallery, does that do it? No, I don't know what I did.
Wait, can you see? Is that better?
Can other people see? It should be on, they should all be pinned. Dina, it might be something that you can change on your end. Because you should also be seeing how I see it. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I can see 3 windows. Okay. I can see.
I think you might be able to pin the
yeah, I have all 3.
And you might be able to pin the video yourself if you find the like Awafi Kitchen email.
It'll be also, so Dina, we can also just WhatsApp you a picture, like a picture afterwards if you're missing it right now.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Camille. Like even with it, like across West Asia or North Africa, the traditions are super different. And I know that, like, I'm really grateful, you know, I just saw Michal posted, like, there is a lot of like Mizrahi community, like really trying to preserve these rituals. And it's hard because like, there's a lot of different ones. And I think that is like just the point of Mizrahi as a term. I think, you know, I won't speak for you, Sam, but I think like feeling a little unsure if like that's the right word to describe Mizrahi is like, it's kind of like queer. It's like a reclaimed term that means Oriental in Hebrew and was like a derogatory term for Eastern Jews. Like, and there's not really a defined like ethnicity around it. It's not really specific. And so it's like kind of confusing, like who is Mizrahi? And also it's like in the context of growing up or like being a non-Ashkenazi Jew or a non-European Jew in 48 versus like, that wasn't my experience. I didn't have much more of an experience as like an Arab American who is Jewish or like, you know, whatever that entails. So, you know, but I think that is a movement building term that's useful for people to connect with each other. And there is a lot of shared experience there. And like people are doing really cool work around like holding on to these traditions, especially like the rituals and the prayers. And like, I think there probably will be some, you know, combined like future where like, it's, you know, like pan Mizrahi, whatever. And it is like a kind of mishmash of things, but you know, that is, you know, everything's constantly evolving.
Yeah, just the last Q&A comment, Fatima just wanted to say thank you so much for all the history you guys bring up. I really appreciate it a lot. I'm Iraqi, and it hurts me when I see people don't know about what we have. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Fatima. That really, I mean, that's something that you talk about, Annabelle, a lot. Like, I think connecting with other Iraqis is some of like the most like valuable parts of sharing this, right? I think like there's a lot of baggage that gets carried around when you are like in a, you know, I think like specifically speaking from our experience as Iraqi Jews, our family as Iraqi Jews, like going through a period where there was, you know, like so much trauma that was trying to divide Iraqis, right? And that, in a lot of ways, like looking at history, like the exodus of the Iraqi Jews was kind of just the tip of the iceberg in terms of like so much violent factionalism that occurred in that region. And so, I mean, that's what's amazing, you know, be able to share this and connect with other Iraqis is like, I think something that's so special about getting to share this food and this culture with people, right? I know that's something you talk about a lot, Annabelle.
Yeah, I think I think it's like something that I really want to be prioritizing more, and I'm so grateful to RAWI Fest for hosting us and like creating this forum or creating this community, and just like seeing a lot of the attendees like with shared heritage is really, really special. And you know, I really appreciate the work that y'all are doing to be really intersectional in terms of thinking about like all of us in diaspora, and you know, and like, yeah, what you said. It's incredibly meaningful and has been challenging, and I think took a lot of work to feel like we got to belong to this community, because the reality is that actually like our parents' generation didn't. Like they came here and like didn't really get to claim like being Arab Americans, despite like moving from Iraq and like being fluent in Arabic, and you know, and so I think it did take a lot of time, and like I'm feeling a lot of like hope and like gratitude for the ability to like connect with all these people on Instagram, or like, you know, we like will talk to Iraqis like in Iraq, where like, wow, I'm like so great, I'm learning this history. I think like, you know, politics is politics, and then we're like individuals. And yeah, so good to see you all here. And Fatima, like I feel like you're in Massachusetts, we should connect.
Amazing. Okay, well, we have about 1 minute left.
So I'm gonna do the sandwich.
Yes, we have to get
what
that.
was the name for the sandwich? Like what was it? Do you remember?
Let's see if I can find it in the chat.
So I cut up in the spoon and I toasted it. And
Sequoia.
Sequoia. So here's the egg. I kind of chopped it up a bit. And I'm just gonna put everything in here. It's not gonna be so shocking what happens. I saw, is there any pop-up events coming up? I'm trying to think. Not at the moment, but I will say that, you know, and I know maybe 1 or 2 people, Jeffrey, Monique, are part of that initiative, the Iraqi Seed Saving Initiative, which is like a national project. Honestly, it could be international, but it's national in that most of the people are in the US right now. Growers, anyone who has like interest in growing and saving Iraqi heritage seed crops, we, you know, are always looking, especially, I think like particularly people with Iraqi heritage, but we're still like figuring out what makes the most sense, because I think we're holding, like we want it to be a cultural work that we're, you know, sharing, that has like everyone has this shared experience, but also like we're talking to people like coming back from Iraq, talking about like a lot of these seeds and varieties of crops like being on the verge of extinction. And so this is like kind of a time sensitive, like there's some, like if anyone wants to grow a bunch of date palms in, you know, Southern California, like email me, you know, because I, you know, like it's, yeah. So people are coming back with seeds, like, you know, trace amounts of seeds that are like some of the last of certain varieties, and just thinking about, you know, we think about recipes being something that holds on to culture, but, you know, I think the crops and the varieties of crops are also a really big part of that. So let us know if you're interested. We're going to be doing a little bit more outreach, and we have some seeds that we saved this year that we'll be willing to distribute, and always interested if anyone has seeds, like if they've been saving seeds in their family for certain varieties, like we'd love, or has ideas of varieties that you would like to see. Like, oh, my aunt always grew this cucumber and I would love to, you know, so definitely reach out. And that's sort of something that thinking more about these days. We're just putting things in the sandwich.
Okay, this is the final reveal.
I don't know how to make it look like artsy.
We had one, sorry, Annabelle, we had one last Q&A. If you can answer really quickly, we're putting it together. We had, so much of the culinary world is white, male, straight dominated. Can you speak to what it means for you to be claiming space in this way? And it's a hard question to answer. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think there's like a lot of importance of, and I think that is actually, okay, I would say my answer to that, and that's my experience. Like I have friends who are like queer, femme, women, powerhouse, like badass, like fine dining chefs who like want to like sell meals for like $200 and like make really, you know, making marks on the restaurant world. And like, I have a lot of respect for that. I think like, I'll speak for like myself, like just, especially with this kind of food, like I think what is lost when it's like a very like cis white male environment is that it's like very severed from like the like auntie, like grandma in the kitchen, like deeply rooted in cultural history, like grandma food that's not like, you know, like plated like 2 cucumbers, like, you know, just like, you know, like fine art, like versus like a hearty meal that might not look like super photogenic, but is like carries a lot of stories with it. And I think that's what I'm more interested in, and like want to uplift, and like, you know, narrative cuisine and cuisine that's like rooted in personal history, and like that does feel related to like identities that I hold. I'm gonna put amba in.
Yes, okay, the finishing touch. All right, and then maybe for Dina, if
really like, it's all shoved in there. But there's the
yeah,
egg.
but I think you get the gist. You want to show it on your like face camera too, so Dina can see.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. Well, hopefully, I feel like this is like, if only we could see. Like I wish we could all hold up our sandwiches for all those of you like following along, and we could do like a comparison, but you'll have to just celebrate, you know, on your own for this one. But yeah, how does it taste, Annabelle?
Yeah, it tastes like home. So cheesy, but like I just say, like, if you can make if you can like recreate a dish that like you know, like reminds you of home, then you can bring home wherever you go. And I think that's why diasporic people like always are so attached to recipes and food.
Yeah, totally. Amazing. Well, thanks y'all so much.
Oh, I realized we have the Instagram and the Facebook and the website, but like email the Awafi Kitchen at gmail.com. We're always excited to think about how to collaborate. You know, events like this, like any like creative like collaboration, or the seed saving, or Sam, if you want to like plug anything.
No, I think we did it.
Or we have questions about where to get amba.
Yes, I'll plug that. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for sharing this space with us, and, you know, hanging around to hear all of our ramblings today. So really, really appreciate everyone who's in the space today.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm just gonna close out the event. Thank you so much for coming. This was so fun. I will throw up all those links from earlier. And yeah, thank you all for coming. This Recording will be up ideally by the end of the week. I'm saying that goal here live so you all can hold me accountable to that. It'll be on the RAWI YouTube, and it will have captions as well. And yeah, you'll get a reminder email with whatever you registered with. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Have a nice night.